All right. So yesterday, I just kind of want to go over, so this way it's like a refresher or something that can be used to reference later on if you forget something that we covered. But also for those that weren't in class, they'll have this information as well. Um, so when we started, we talked about the difference between stitched and perfect binding. We put together those little prototypes to kind of illustrate what that is. So setting up the document, we have those 12 pages. You're going to go to new document. And then in here, I quickly went over, picas, inches, points. Picas is useful in publication page layout. However, I do not force students to learn it. But there is one instance where it is useful when we're trying to figure out the width of columns. We are printing on 11 by 17 paper. So to make things a little easier, let's keep everything 8 by 10.5. So it gives us a little bit of extra room for a bleed. Um, Make sure there's 12 pages. Make sure you're utilizing facing pages. So this way then the two pages come together. You can turn this off. I find it annoying. But if you just want to have a text frame that's already waiting for you to use, you can definitely click it. But I keep that turned off. For columns, keep it as one. So we're going to get more into grid systems and everything next week. But for now, let's just keep it as one column. And then the margins, the default is 0.5. That's fine. You will end up, or you should anyway, change this later on, but you shouldn't change it until you know how you want the page layout to look. And then you bleed. Let's just keep it a eighth of an inch, and that will be completely enough for this. No slug, you don't need that. And then we're going to hit create. So now when we look at our pages, you can see all 12 pages are sitting right here. Now, again, we had shown the illustration of, when all of your pages are put together to create the stitch binding. Certain pages are together, right? So your front cover and back cover should be side by side. However, if you were setting up a document for perfect bound, this is the way that you would set it up, because the cover is a completely separate file, because you have to account for the spine of the actual magazine or booklet or brochure or whatever you're creating. All right. Now to start, by default, you have the one page all by itself, and you have these two are selected. All right. So when you try and move a page next to this, it will not ever kind of click over. It just keeps shoving everything in. If we delete this, and assuming we can get 2 and 3 up, it just will move 2 up into that spot. All right. So when we want to make sure that we have 2 pages side by side, so we can have the cover and the back cover right next to it, we need to select all of these pages. So everything is highlighted in blue. Go up to these 3 lines and deselect these 2 options. So deselect the document and selected spreads to shuffle. Now I can take page 12, which is the back cover, and I can move it up. And if you see the little bracket, that's going to put it right next to the spine. If I come out here and I let go, it's just going to give a separate page that's not going to be aligned properly. All right. So you drag down and you wait till you see the bracket. If you go too far and you're in here, it puts those 2 pages on the right side of the spine. That's useful if you're going to be creating a unique folding mechanism where you're going to have like a gatefold or something. But what we want is sitting here. So there we have the front cover sitting on the right, back cover sitting on the left, and then we work our way down. All right. Next, I talked about saving backups. Please save backups. So I have, because of yesterday's class, right here. So this is the file that we had. When I am working on a file, you're going to see that this is open. So this is the file itself. This is a temporary file. This is holding information as you're working on it. When I'm no longer have this file open, nothing's there. Okay. InDesign is going to corrupt, absolutely. And you want to be prepared for when your file goes corrupt. If you hold Option and you drag, you can see I have a plus symbol, all right? Make a copy, right? So every time that you get to a certain point where, all right, I have a nice chunk of work done, just make a copy. So now this just sits over here, you ignore it. You keep working on this one. Then the next day you work on a little bit and you have a couple hours worth of work in there, make another copy. Then next week you're working on it, make another copy. So by the end of the process, you'll have all of these copies that if something happens to this file, and for some of you it will, you only end up losing a day's worth of work, all right, or an hour or whatever, how many times that you want to make a copy. Once you are done with this process, you can select all of these copies and delete them, all right? You don't need to hold on to them for any reason. You just want to make sure that if something happens, you have a backup plan, all right? All right, so now back into this file, since this is the one that we were using yesterday. Where is this? Because I think, there we go. Let's get rid of this untitled. Don't save. All right. We talked about the bleeds and margins. Your bleed is the red line. So anything that you want to carry over, just like in every project we work on, has to have a bleed. Your margins typically has to be at least double whatever your bleed is. So this way you keep things away. But we talked about sea of text. Like you don't to read a page, right? You don't want to come to this. No one's going to read this. All right. Your job is to create, a pleasant experience of people reading through, what the copy text is. Okay. So you will end up changing these margins. Okay. All right. We talked about adding pages. All right. So let me kind of go through that process. I'm going to delete this from the pages. All right, so you have your blank page, you're coming up with different ideas, and you need to have a page number, okay? So you're going to select your type tool. Now, when you add any kind of text to the document, you have to create a text box. You click and drag, and then you have a text box here, okay? So it can be page 2. We can tighten up the text box if we want to and move this around. If you want to change the whether it's left align, center, or right, this is where you would do it. If you don't have that, you go to Window, go down to Type, and then you go to Paragraph. So it's going to be the exact same thing of what you have in Illustrator. All right, so we have this and this. So by default, it's always going to be aligned to the top. Okay, if we hit Command B, it's going to bring up this text frame option. You're going to be using this text frame option dialog box often. All right, here, right down the vertical justification. This you can click and you have options from top, which is going to be the default, center, bottom, and justified. All right, so if we hit bottom, because we want this to kind of sit at the bottom of our margin, we can then select this. We can come up here, change it to whatever size we want. We can change the typeface to something that we want, just like in everything that you have ever used in Illustrator and in Photoshop. All right, so we have this, we got this all set. Now we want to have this on every single page. Okay, now we are on, so this is basically, depending on what we're doing, this is the cover, back cover, this is the inside front, and this would be page 1. So typically you're not going to have anything on this page, but we can, say, fine, we're on page 3, we're going to have this whatever. And if we move this over here, and we select this, we hit the right align, and we move it to the right hand side, you do not continue going through every single page changing this to that. All right, because even though this is only a 12-page document, and if things change, you don't want to go through that many pages and manually change those pages. There are many times that when you are changing these, you're moving these 2 spreads over here, you're moving these 2 spreads down here. That happens a lot. Imagine that you have a 200-page document and you end up manually putting in these page numbers. You would not want to sit there and then say, all right, well, page 100 now is going to be page 50. And now every single page after that, I have to go back in and manually change. Okay? What you do is you're going to add a marker to your layout. And it's going to automatically change depending on what page that's put on. All right? So you can't do this until you choose what kind of typeface you want. All right? So you have to go through the process of putting this in here. We can get rid of the page. We can just have the number if we want. All right, so we just have 2. Now, once you have that typeface, select that typeface with your type tool. Then you can go up to type. Go down to insert special character, markers, current page number. That is going to replace that number 2 with a marker that's going to change automatically. So I'm going to hit this, and now you can see that is page 3 because we are on page 3. So now if I do the same thing over here, or if I just simply now copy this over, it automatically changes to page 4. All right. So that is how you would have the page numbers going through your entire document. But again, we're not going to, so let's say we copy this, Command C, and then we paste it over here. You can see because this is page 1, that's now page 1 there, and that's page 2. You don't want to end up putting that on every single page. You want to do it one time, all right? Because let's say we go through 12 pages and we have this, and I'm like, you know what? I really don't like that typeface or that color. I want to change the color, to blue. And then on the right over here, I'm going to want this to be something dumb, but just to illustrate the purposes, it's going to be magenta. And I'm now realizing that I really think they both should be blue. I don't want to go through and change all of those over and over and over again. All right. So what you're going to do, once you have a design layout that you want, you're going to select what you have, Command X to cut. All right. I'm going to delete these out of here. And then in your pages, you will see a parent. Okay. Now, A just means, that's the first parent that you have. You can have a B parent, C parent, and so forth. But so you're going to have your parent. We're going to double click it, and then I'm going to paste in place. And now you can see I have A and I have A. All right, because I'm an A parent. When I double click on the pages, you can see those pages are now there. They're not clickable because they're part of the parent. When I go to the other pages, you can see 5 and 6, 8 and 7, and so forth. All right. Now I want to change this. I no longer want this to be magenta. I want it to be blue. So if I double click on the parent again, I can select this, go up here, change it to blue. And now when I go back, it's automatically changed. All right. So no matter whatever you put in the parent is going to show up on every single page. Let's say you want to have a background color, right? So if I go under my parent and I want to have a bar that goes all the way across the top, and then I go into all my pages, you can see all of those pages has that bar. All right, so think of it as that template that is going to automatically apply whatever is put on there onto all your pages. All right, good. Dropping in your text. So we quickly, we looked at the nature.com. I told you for Wednesday, I want you to pick out what article that you want to work with. Now, I had said the first thing I do when someone gives me their copy text, right? So a client will say, all right, we want this design. We're not really sure how many pages it's going to need to be. Now, remember, we talked about how many increments of pages, right? So we folded the paper. So we have the 11 by 17, it's folded, and you have back and side. So you have increments of 4. So if you had to add pages, if you're doing stitch binding, it has to be in increments of 4. Okay. So the first thing I do is I copy that text and I paste that text into a text box. All right. So I have all that text there and I go through and I kind of figure out throughout the entire document where everything is going to be. All right. So I look at sections. I look at areas where it's like, all right, so this is going to be a section. And really you would look at the original file that was given, and then you can kind of break that down that way. Also, you want to think about, how can I bring images into this? How can I bring in graphs? How can I bring in illustrations? So you want to break up the text. You never want to just see straight text like this. You want to figure out ways of bringing in negative space, bringing in other objects, other elements that help break up this sea of text. Once you do that and you go through your entire document, you now know, one, do I have enough text? All right. So even though I don't want to dictate what you have to use to design by saying, all right, here's all the text you got to use, you're still kind of getting that same idea from this process. You're still going in and saying, all right, well, I need to have a certain amount of text that fills this. If you end up filling up all your text, and let's say this is all the text that I end up having these pages open, that's not going to work. All right. So you want to go through that process, and you want to make sure that you have enough text, or you want to make sure you don't have too much text. What if you end up filling every single page, and every single page looks like this? That's not going to give you enough to work images in, work negative space, and work other objects into your layout. So you want to make sure that whatever article you choose, it is going to fit in this 12-page document. Now, we had done this as well, right? We said, all right, we want to label this just so this way you have that little mock-up that you created, and you're kind of going through and saying, all right, this is the front cover. All right, please know that this is the front cover. This is the back cover, right? Because it's going to be folded, and the spine, or rather the fold, is always going to be on the left-hand side, and we open our books, from right to left. So you can label it. You say the front cover, back cover, and then if you want to continue this labeling in here, this is the inside front cover, and this was the first page, right? So page 1, but it also, I said, this is going to be the table of contents. So that means the actual article itself doesn't really start until page 5 and 6. So you have 5 and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These are the 3 main pages I'm looking for you to actually design, all right? The inside front cover, we said it can be strictly information about the authors, the copyright information. If there's any kind of details that need to go into this document, let that happen. Table of contents is going to be the different sections throughout this book. You don't have that many pages, but we will talk more about the table of contents. The very end, the inside back cover sitting here, and then this is the last page. If you can, there's going to be references that you need to do. So that's going to be list text. That's going to follow different rules than what we talk about for body text. You can use this area here, or if it spills over into here. If your document fills all 3 of these and you need to use this last page, use it. All right. But this page will then become the references. But ideally, I would love for you to only have 3 spreads to actually worry about and design for this project. Okay. All right, so now we drop this sitting in here, and we need to break it up because we talked about characters per line. All right. When we read, and as we're working through and reading this, we do not read every single word, right? So let me zoom in. Our eyes are not going to sit here and move across as if we're going smoothly across like a typewriter, just kind of like typing everything out, reading in, then the next, and few. We end up jumping our eyes across. And sometimes we're filling in the gaps, right? So as we're reading, there's about 7-ish characters to the right that our brain is almost looking at, right? So it's kind of in our view, but we're not really focusing on it, but we're gathering that information, and we're also filling in the blanks. So our eyes are probably going to hit in, and we're going to next, months, filling in the and few, from, perch, and we're filling in its. But then there are times that our eye bounces backwards. We may skip over a top A, and then our eye backtracks to a top and then goes into in and chili. So as we're working across, that's how we read text. Because of that, we need to make certain that we have a comfortable distance or characters per line that our eyes are going to go and then be able to come back. If we keep our text very long and we get to the end and we're sitting here, this is too far for our eyes to then know this is the page, this is the next line that we should be going. And then we go across and then it's here. Because the leading is so tight that we will not be able to, we'll end up losing track of where we are, basically. Okay? Now, the way that we're reading and doing this, the same thing is going to happen if we're super narrow. If we have very narrow text, why is this? Let me put this back here. If our text is very narrow, think about what I just said, how our eyes bounce across. We end up getting to the end of the line too quickly. And then we're going down, and then we're getting too quickly and going down. We become frustrated. We might not know why we're frustrated, but it is frustrating. Your job as a designer is to make the reading a pleasant experience. All right, so you need to make certain that this just kind of fades into the background and you're able to work through this very quickly. So there is an optimal width for the text, okay? Characters per line. Ideally, right? And what I'm about to say is not black and white, right? You can, you're definitely going to have exceptions to this rule, and it's also going to depend on the typeface you're using, the X height, and how many characters per line. But generally speaking, a good target to reach is somewhere in between 50 and 75 characters per line. The Goldilocks, 65, all right? There are times that you may be at 80 or 85. There may be times that you end up dropping into 40. But again, the 50 to 75 is kind of where you want to be. Now, the only time I teach students about pica is this rule. Like, so where do you even start? So when you choose a typeface, right, and you're choosing a size. So right now, my size is 10 points, right? What you can do very quickly is you double it. So if I'm at 10 points, 10 double is 20. I'm going to select my column and I'm going to make it 20 pica, right? If you do not have up here on the left, because some students didn't see this in their laptop, you can go to, I think I brought it up here, right here, transform, all right? So window, and then I think it was, yeah, right here. Go to Object and Layout, go to Transform. You will have this, which is basically this right here, all right? So what I'm selecting, you can see it's 18p6. If you're not seeing pica, and this is still in inches, so let me put this in inches, right? So you can see I have the IN for inches. You can override that, right? So I'm going to select this width. I'm going to type in 20 and then PICA and hit return. So this is 20 pica wide. This would be the Goldilocks. The minimum that you can do is 1.5. So I'm going to select this. I have 10 points. 1.5 is going to be 15. I'm going to select this, type in 1.5, PICA, hit return. This is the least, all right? So this is like the smallest or the narrowest column of text that you can have for 10 point. The widest is going to be 2.5, all right? So I'm going to select this. It's very strange that happened like there, but I'm going to now change 10 points, 2.5, that's going to be 25 pica. So this is the widest. So now I have to start very quickly what my text can be. So if I want this to be the middle, if this is going to be my minimum, or if that's going to be my maximum. So you can see if I want to go to the max, I'm going to have this space sitting here. So maybe there's graphs, or maybe there are images that I want to kind of work through the side of my column. So maybe this is the layout that I want. Maybe I want more narrow because I want to have these two sitting here side by side, and then I have some kind of graphic, or I'm having this sitting on the side over here. All right. If I have my Goldilocks and I move this over, you can see that these two kind of sit with what I have right now at the moment. Perfect. Okay. Now, when you have two columns or three columns, you're going to have a space in between those columns. That space in between the two columns, that's your gutter. All right. So now there is a rule that you cannot break. The rule is the width between your two columns, the gutter, has to be wider than the space between your paragraphs. All right, that's the one rule you cannot do. Because if, oops, sorry. Let's say I have this text. I like to do it this way because I think it illustrates it a little bit easier. So now let's say I have this happening, right? Super tight. I'm coming through and you can see that this column is so much closer than this. Your eye, as someone's reading, could accidentally jump the gutter and move on into the next column rather than continuing down. All right, so that's the one rule that you cannot break for page layout when you're working with two columns. Okay? All right, so now when you want to break up the two columns, you have a couple options. If I bring this all the way out here, I can come up to here. So you can see I have this option here where I can make it into two columns. I can make it into three. If you do not see that, you can go into your Command B. Select Command B, and you have that same option right here. So the top number here are the number of columns. So I hit 2, and then underneath, that is where I control my gutter. All right? So that's one way of doing it. When you do this, you're limited to what can happen. So now you can see, as I make this shorter, these two columns are locked together. Okay? Another way to have two columns is to then say, all right, I want this to be a column, then I want a column on the right-hand side. All right? So you have two options to do this. When you click this, you're going to see a little red box here. That lets me know that I have more text beyond what's being shown. If I click, you can see I have a bunch of text sitting next to my cursor. When I click and drag, that creates a text box that this text spills over into there. And I can continue making that connection all the way to whatever I need to have. All right. You can make a continuous all the way through pages. The issue being with that is, when you're designing this, you really want to control where that stops and where it breaks. All right. So you're better off making these link boxes here. If you want to have one continuous text box at the very beginning process to see how much space you're using across the entire document, do it. So this way then you can say, all right, I'm dropping this text in. I know I'm going to be using, it's filling up, say 3 or 5 of these, pages that I need to do. Awesome. But then when you actually start designing and, laying out page, you really want to maintain just that two spreads with this text linked. All right. The good thing about this, they're independent of one another. So now I can control this as opposed to this, and I can move this down. So it's not linked, where when you let InDesign, have two columns, it basically is going to be locked in. Okay. All right. Done. Yeah. Oh, and the other thing, so what I tend to do, so when I want to have this sitting here and I want to have this being a text box, let me put this back to 20 pica, sitting here, and then I move this over. So I'll make a copy of it because I just want to kind of be lazy and use the exact same width of the column that I'm doing. I then delete that text in there, so I have an empty text box. Sometimes I'll even throw one out here. So this way, if I know I'm going to be using this text box over and over again, I have that kind of just sitting there for me to bring into another page. So now when I do the same thing and I click this red box, instead of clicking and dragging, I can click inside an existing text box and then it just spills over into there. All right. All right. The only other thing that we had covered was tweaking the margins, right? So what you need to be careful of. So once you have your page number sitting down here, you have a footer, maybe you have some text saying, Project 3 Advanced Design, which I wouldn't put. I think that's what I put, but no. Put something, whatever, maybe what the title of the article is. Once you have that, now you need to adjust your margins. Now, right now, you can see I have 3 and 4 is selected, right? So if I come up to layout and I go back to my margins and columns, right here you have your top, bottom, inside, outside. All right. If I adjust my bottom up, you can see I moved my bottom margin up. And you want to move it up away from your text, because what you do not want is to have your column of text getting super close to your page numbers. You want to have them sitting far enough away where it's not going to interfere. So then when you come up, you go to margins and columns, you bring up the bottom to the bottom of your text, you hit OK, everything is good. The issue is it didn't change any of the other margins. See, it's sitting there because I only had these two selected. So when you want to change all of them, which it's going to kind of like throw everything off. So I'm going to do these two right here, right? So you can see this and this. I'm going to select these four only, go up to margins and columns, and then increase. And now when I look at these two, they're like so. Because right now I have those two, I have this one that's different, then I have this one that's different. If I select all of these and I go here to margins, it's going to have blanks, all right? So I'm going to have to manually put in what those are, which isn't a big deal. So if I come over here and I say, all right, this is really what I wanted, this one here, I'm going to come to this one spread, or this page, select this, and I can write this down. So I have 1 inch, and then my outside, I'm going to copy, so I know it's half, half, 1, and this. Now I can go here. This was 1. And then I'm going to paste that. So now I have that on everything. Okay? All right. So that is basically what we covered throughout the class yesterday. We did not get as far as I wanted to, unfortunately. We do have plenty more to cover in tomorrow's class, but hopefully this is a reference for those of you that were there, and for those of you that missed class. Hopefully this is useful to try and catch up. But I'm looking forward to seeing what articles all of you pick. Remember, everything that is in that article is fair game. You can use it. It's as if they gave you, here's all this information, here are the graphs that you can use, here is the illustrations, anything, any photos that is in that article, you are allowed to use. All right? You can use other images that you find outside, but you're going to need to reference those. Okay? So good luck, and I will see you all in class tomorrow.